Have you ever wrestled with something huge, like a big project at work or learning something totally new, or even just navigating, the everyday stuff? What if there were kind of timeless principles to help you with all that, to approach any challenge strategically?
That's a great question. And that's exactly where we're going today. We're taking a deep dive into The Art of War by Sun Tzu.
The art of war. Okay, so this was written over 2,000 years ago, right?
It was during a time of huge civil conflict in China. Actually, the same period they gave us other classics like the Tao Te Ching.
The Tao Te Ching. Yeah, that's fascinating. So we're talking about some really old wisdom here, but you're saying it's still relevant today.
Remarkably so. I mean, think about it. Navigating difficulty, achieving goals, those are timeless challenges, right?
Absolutely. But the art of war, I mean, some people might think that's just about, battles and stuff.
Right, but it's so much more than that. The insights into strategy, planning, they apply to so many things. Whether you're preparing for a crucial meeting, trying to learn a new skill, anything really.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So we're going to extract the core principles from this ancient text, make them practical for today.
Exactly. And we're going to do it in a way that's hopefully easy to grasp, not overwhelming.
I like that. No one wants information overload, right? So, to be clear, we're not just looking at the original Art of War. We have something a little more in-depth
We
written.
do. We're using The Art of War,
Mhm.
complete texts and commentaries. So we get Sun Tzu's original words, but also interpretations from throughout history,
Yeah.
different perspectives.
Oh, that's cool. So we get to see how people have understood this over time.
Exactly. We'll get a richer understanding.
Love it. So our mission today is clear. We're diving deep into the art of war, finding the most valuable insights, the stuff that can actually help us think strategically and tackle the challenges we face every day.
Right. The tools for planning, navigating difficult situations, all that.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
Well, why don't we start right at the beginning with one of the most fundamental principles. Plan for what is difficult while it is easy. Do what is great while it is small.
Plan for what is difficult while it is easy. I like that. Makes sense, right? Tackle the big stuff when it's still manageable.
Exactly. The commentaries really emphasize that. Like the most difficult things, the truly great things, they're built on a foundation of starting early when things are still small.
It's like getting that first draft done so you don't feel so overwhelmed by the final paper.
Exactly. Or breaking down a huge project into smaller, more manageable tasks.
Right, so you're not staring at this giant mountain of work. So it's all about those small steps taken early.
And being proactive. The text even says, sages never do what is great, and this is why they can achieve that greatness.
Interesting. So it's not about avoiding the big stuff. It's about approaching it in a smart way.
Right. Think of it like being aware of danger before danger, to be aware of destruction before destruction, to be aware of calamity before calamity.
Whoa, okay, that's deep. It's about having that awareness, that foresight to anticipate problems before they become huge.
Precisely. And the text introduces this concept of strong action. It's about, like, training your body and mind without feeling burdened, working in the world without being overwhelmed, just handling things smoothly.
So it's about cultivating a state of like readiness,
Yeah.
efficiency.
Yeah, exactly. And here's a key takeaway. Developing deep knowledge of principle. It's like understanding the underlying rules of the game you're playing.
I like that, knowing the rules of the game.
Because when you have that, even negative situations can become positive. Setbacks become learning opportunities. You're not just reacting, you're understanding.
So it's about having that fundamental understanding to navigate anything effectively. You might even turn those setbacks to your advantage.
Right. And speaking of navigating things effectively, that leads us to the next principle. Emotional detachment. Cultivating a sense of enigma.
Enigma.
Yeah, it's about being a little mysterious, unpredictable.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that tie into the art of war?
Well, Sun Tzu says, those who are good at knighthood are not militaristic. Those who are good at battle do not become angry. Those who are good at prevailing over opponents do not get involved.
Don't get involved. I don't know if I can agree with that one.
Well, it's not about literal non-involvement. It's more about not letting emotions cloud your judgment, not getting caught up in anger or frustration, or even excessive enthusiasm.
So keep a cool head.
Exactly. Because when you're emotionally detached, you make better decisions. You're less predictable.
Makes sense. Whether you're in a negotiation, dealing with a difficult person, whatever, keeping your cool is a good strategy.
It is. And this emotional detachment, it's part of a larger strategy, being unfathomable. That's where the enigma comes in. It's a very Taoist concept.
Taoist, like the Tao Te Ching.
Exactly. And Sun Tzu says, those skilled in defense hide in the deepest depths of the earth. Those skilled in attack maneuver in the highest heights of the sky. Therefore, they can preserve themselves and achieve complete victory.
Okay, I like that imagery. Deepest depths of the earth, highest heights of the sky. So it's about being adaptable, flexible.
And unpredictable. If your opponent can't figure you out, they can't plan against you.
Right, like in poker, you don't want to show your hand too early.
Exactly. Keep them guessing. That's the power of Enigma.
I'm starting to see how all this ancient wisdom can apply today.
It's really fascinating, isn't it?
It is. So we've talked about planning early, staying detached, what's next?
Well, how about insight and foresight?
Seeing the big picture.
Even more than that. Seeing what others don't see. Knowing what others don't know.
Okay, that sounds pretty powerful.
It is. Sun Tzu says, a general must see alone and know alone.
Alone. That sounds lonely.
Well, not necessarily. It's more about developing your own unique perspective,
Yeah.
not just following the crowd. The text goes on to say that brilliance is seeing what others don't, and genius is knowing what others don't.
So it's about cultivating that deep understanding, that insight.
Right. And the commentaries say that people with those qualities, the brilliant geniuses, they win first because they've already anticipated everything. They're unassailable in defense, irresistible in attack.
So it's like they've already won the battle before it even starts.
Exactly. And there's a connection here to Taoist practice, too, the idea of mastering emptiness and fullness. Emptiness and fullness. That sounds like a paradox.
It is, in a way. It's about cultivating inner clarity, emptiness, so you can then act with focus and precision, fullness.
So it's like clearing your mind so you can see the situation clearly.
And then act decisively.
Okay, that's starting to click for me. So we've got planning, emotional control, insight. What about actually engaging in a challenge?
That's a good question. And Sun Tzu gives us some pretty direct advice here. Have no hard feelings toward anyone who has not shown you enmity. Do not fight with anyone who does not oppose you.
Do not fight with anyone who does not oppose you. That's interesting.
Right. It's about choosing your battles, not wasting energy on unnecessary conflict. Don't sweat the small stuff.
Exactly. Conserve your energy for the things that truly matter. And it's also about recognizing expertise. The text compares it to an engineer. The best person to judge an engineer's work is another engineer.
Right. You wouldn't ask a baker to judge a bridge, so seek out informed opinions.
Right. Get feedback from people who understand what you're doing.
So even though it's called The Art of War, Sun Tzu wasn't actually promoting warfare, was he?
Not at all. His goal was actually to minimize and even prevent warfare through deep analysis and understanding.
So he wanted to understand conflict so well that it could be avoided.
Exactly. But the text also recognizes the reality of conflict. It's a part of life.
Right. And that's where the strategic principles come in, to help us navigate those situations effectively.
And ethically. It's not just about winning at all costs. The text even references the Tao Te Ching here, and its emphasis on the three treasures: kindness, frugality, and humility.
Kindness, frugality, and humility. Those sound more like personal virtues than strategic principles.
And yet they're deeply intertwined. Kindness leads to courage, frugality enables generosity, and humility ensures long-term survival. Abandoning these values in favor of aggression, well, that's a recipe for disaster.
So ethics matter, even in the midst of conflict.
They do. In fact, practicing kindness can even lead to strength and security. It's a counterintuitive but powerful idea.
Okay, so beyond the philosophical stuff, Sun Tzu also gets into more practical considerations, right? Like the environment you're operating in.
Absolutely. The terrain. The text is very specific about the need to assess the environment, to understand the distance, the difficulty of movement, the safety of the area.
Makes sense. You wouldn't launch a product without understanding the market.
Right. You need to know the lay of the land, both literally and figuratively.
The lay of the land. I like that.
It's foundational to any successful strategy.
Okay, so you understand the environment. What else? What about leadership? Sun Tzu talks about that too, right?
He does. He identifies 5 key virtues of a good leader: intelligence, trustworthiness, humaneness, courage, and sternness.
5 virtues. Okay, so intelligence, that's obvious. Trustworthiness, yeah, gotta have that. Humaneness, what's that about?
Caring for the people you lead. Understanding their needs.
Okay, and courage, yeah, gotta make the tough decisions. But sternness, that sounds a little harsh.
It's about discipline, making sure the rules are followed, not being a pushover. Think about it. Even in a creative field, you need some structure, some boundaries.
That's true. So it's about balance. A good leader needs all five of those qualities.
Exactly. It's a holistic view of leadership.
Okay, so you've got your great leader, a solid plan. What about the cost of all this? I mean, any big effort, there's going to be some cost, right?
Absolutely. Sun Tzu doesn't shy away from that. The text talks about the financial and strategic risks of prolonged operations. Things dragging on too long.
Like a war that just keeps going and going, draining resources, creating new problems.
Exactly. It's like a fire that burns itself out.
Mm.
The commentaries use that analogy. They emphasize the need for efficiency, for swift action.
So time is a factor. Got to keep things moving.
Right. Prolonged conflicts, they just create more risk, more opportunity for things to go wrong.
So what's the antidote to that? How do you keep things moving, keep people motivated?
Rewards.
Mm.
Recognizing achievements. Sun Tzu talks about that too. He says you need to reward early successes to motivate the whole group.
So it's not just about the big win at the end.
No. Celebrate those small wins along the way. It keeps morale high.
Like acknowledge a team member who went above and beyond, even on a small task.
Exactly. And the text also talks about integrating people you've overcome, like former adversaries. Treat them well. Make them part of your team.
Okay, so it's not just about defeating the opposition. It's about potentially turning them into allies.
Precisely. Turn a negative into a positive.
Clever. So we've talked about a lot of different principles. What about the actual moment of action, the moment you engage with a challenge?
Well, Sun Tzu has a very clear preference here. He compares striking early, while your opponent is still planning, to attacking a fortified city.
I'm guessing he prefers striking early.
He does. He says attacking a fortified city is a last resort, the worst kind of military operation.
So it's better to act before things get too entrenched, too difficult.
Right. Address problems before they become crises.
Disrupt their plans before they can even launch them.
Exactly. Secure victory before the battle even begins.
That's a powerful idea. So the ideal is to win without a huge, messy fight.
That's the ultimate goal. And the truly skilled strategists, their victories, they often don't look like much.
What do you mean?
The text says their victories are not noted for cleverness or bravery. They win because they've already set the stage for success.
They've already done the work behind the scenes.
Exactly. And no one even realizes how brilliant they are. They're like puppet masters, pulling the strings without anyone noticing.
I love that. Victory through formlessness.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so what about those times when conflict is unavoidable? How should we conduct ourselves?
Sun Tzu says, those who use arms well cultivate the way and keep the rules. Thus, they can govern in such a way as to prevail over the corrupt.
Cultivate the way. So there's an ethical dimension to this, even in conflict.
Absolutely. This way includes things like maintaining harmony, not harming the innocent, protecting resources, upholding discipline.
So it's not just about brute force. There are rules, principles.
Right. Even in war, there's a right way to do things.
Makes sense. And we've talked about emptiness and fullness before. How does that apply here?
It's a key strategic concept. Cao says, attack complete emptiness with complete fullness, meaning exploit your opponent's weaknesses when they're most vulnerable. When their forces are scattered, their defenses are down.
So strike when the iron is hot, but be prepared.
Right. That's the fullness part. You need to have your own resources in order.
So it's about timing and preparation.
Exactly. And Master Sun adds another important point. In battle, confrontation is done directly. Victory is gained by surprise.
So sometimes you have to be direct, but the real advantage comes from the element of surprise.
Right. Keep them guessing.
Okay, so directness and surprise. What else?
Adaptability. The text emphasizes the importance of adapting your approach based on the situation. It's like the natural cycles. Sun, moon, seasons, they're constantly interacting, changing.
So strategy is not about sticking to a rigid plan.
No, it's about flowing with the changes, adapting. And Master Sun says that while the basic elements of strategy might be limited, the combinations are endless, like variations in music, color, flavor.
So there's always room for creativity, for innovation.
Absolutely. And then there's the idea of momentum. The text compares it to a catapult. When you release that force, it's swift, deadly.
So momentum is a powerful force.
It is. But Master Sun also cautions against complacency. He says disorder can arise from order, weakness from strength.
What does that mean? How can strength become weakness?
Well, if you rely too much on past successes, if you become complacent, you might miss those subtle shifts, those emerging weaknesses.
So stay vigilant. Always be assessing.
Exactly. Don't let success blind you to potential dangers.
That's good advice for anything, really, not just warfare.
It is. And Mayokan adds that it's often easier to leverage existing momentum than to try to force individual actions. It's about working with the natural flow of things.
So don't swim upstream.
Right. And Zhang Yu emphasizes the importance of delegation, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each individual, and using them accordingly.
Right. Put the right people in the right roles.
Right.
Play to their strengths.
Exactly. And when you're facing an opponent, it's crucial to understand their weaknesses.
Find their weak spots.
Right. Are they poorly trained? Do they have weak leadership? Do they have supply issues? And then focus on strengthening your own advantages in those areas.
So it's about knowing yourself and knowing your enemy. Classic strategy.
It is. And even if your opponent is much larger, much more powerful, there are still ways to gain an advantage.
Okay, how do you do that? How do you take on a giant?
Master Sun says, even if opponents are numerous, they can be made not to fight.
Made not to fight. What does that even mean?
Well, it's about disrupting their plans, keeping them off balance. The commentaries suggest dividing their forces, preventing them from coordinating.
So it's like you're using their size against them, creating chaos and confusion.
Exactly. And to do that, you need to gather intelligence. You need to understand their plan, their patterns of movement.
So spy on them.
Not necessarily spy, but observe. Provoke them into action and see how they react.
Okay, interesting. So it's all about gathering information, understanding their weaknesses.
Right. And then using that information to your advantage.
So the ultimate goal is to be unpredictable, to keep your opponent guessing.
Exactly. The commentaries talk about creating a state of formlessness, where your opponent can't figure out your strategy, your intentions.
That sounds pretty powerful.
It is. And Master Sun says that while everyone can see the outward form of victory, few understand the formless strategy that achieved it.
It's like the magic trick. Everyone sees the rabbit appear, but no one knows how it's done.
A perfect analogy.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the external aspects of strategy. What about the internal? The mental and emotional state of the leader.
That's crucial too. Master Sun says, using order to deal with the disorderly, using calm to deal with the clamorous, is mastering the heart.
Mastering the heart. Okay, so stay calm under pressure.
Right. A leader needs to have a clear, focused mind, not be swayed by chaos or emotions.
Easy to say, hard to do, especially when you're in the middle of a crisis.
It is. But it's essential for making good decisions.
And the environment you're operating in, that plays a role too, right?
A huge role. The text emphasizes the importance of adapting your approach based on the specific circumstances. Don't get stuck in rigid methods.
So be flexible, be like water, right?
Exactly. Adapt to the terrain, whether it's a literal battlefield or a metaphorical one. Master Sun gives specific advice for different types of ground. Avoid unfavorable ground. Strategize carefully on ground you're surrounded on. Fight decisively on dangerous ground.
So know the rules of engagement for each situation.
Precisely. And beyond the immediate context, you also need to think about the well-being of your team, your resources.
Right. You can't function if you're exhausted or if you don't have the tools you need.
Exactly. Master Sun talks about the importance of physical health, securing resources, positioning your forces to take advantage of natural elements.
It's about aligning yourself with the environment.
Right. Working with it, not against it.
Okay, I'm getting a much deeper appreciation for all this. It's not just about war, it's about life.
It is. And one of the most fascinating aspects is the emphasis on observation. Noticing subtle clues, reading the signs.
Like a detective.
In a way, yes. Sun Tzu talks about how even the smallest details can reveal important information. The movement of trees, startled birds, patterns of dust, smoke signals.
Whoa, that's incredible.
And he also talks about observing the enemy's behavior, how they deploy their vehicles, how they advance and retreat, even how they drink water.
So it's like you're reading their body language, their overall demeanor.
Exactly. Looking for any signs of weakness, any cracks in their armor, and then using that information to your advantage.
So it's not just about what they're doing, it's about what their actions reveal about their state of mind.
Precisely. Are they confident? Are they desperate? Are they exhausted? You can glean all that from careful observation.
Wow, that's next level strategy.
It is. And ultimately, the ideal is to achieve victory before any major confrontation takes place.
To win without a fight.
That's the ultimate goal, to have the situation so well in hand that your opponent has no choice but to yield.
And that's where all this preparation, all this observation comes in.
Exactly. You're creating the conditions for success before the battle even begins.
This is blowing my mind.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? And the text even goes into different types of battlefield contexts, the 9 kinds of ground.
9 kinds of ground.
Yeah, like ground of dissolution, where local factions are already fighting. Intersecting ground, which controls important routes. Heavy ground deep within enemy territory. Bad ground with difficult terrain.
So it's acknowledging that not all situations are created equal.
Right. You need to adapt your approach based on the specific type of ground you're on.
Makes sense. So how do you create unity within your own team, especially when facing all these different challenges?
Master Sun uses a great analogy. People in the same boat facing a storm, they naturally cooperate.
Right, shared danger brings people together.
Exactly. And Ma Yao-qian adds that relying on forced loyalty isn't enough. You need to create situations where people understand that their success depends on everyone working together.
So create a sense of shared purpose.
Right. And shared risk.
Okay, what about when you're operating far from your usual base? Do the standard rules still apply?
Not always. The commentary suggests that when you're in a completely different environment, you might need to adapt your systems of reward and punishment.
And so be flexible.
Right. And Master Sun also advises leading with a unified purpose,
Right.
focusing on the task at hand, the potential benefits.
Keep everyone focused on the goal.
Exactly. And speaking of different types of challenges, the text also talks about fire attacks.
Fire attacks, that's getting pretty intense.
It is. But remember, Sun Tzu was writing in a time of constant warfare, so fire was a real threat. And he outlines 5 different types of fire attacks: burning people, burning supplies, burning equipment, burning storehouses, and burning weapons.
Okay, so he was pretty thorough.
He was. And he emphasizes the importance of planning. You need the right tools, the right weather conditions, and you need to be prepared to respond to the chaos that fire creates.
So it's not just about starting a fire and walking away. It's a strategic tool that needs to be used carefully.
Exactly. Now, it's important to remember that the art of war didn't just appear out of thin air. It emerged from a very specific historical and philosophical context.
Right. We talked about the Tao Te Ching earlier, so there were other intellectual currents influencing Sun Tzu's thinking.
Absolutely. The commentaries explain that the art of war came about during a time of huge social upheaval in China, constant warfare. And this led to a lot of reflection on the nature of conflict, the principles of leadership.
So people were really trying to make sense of all the chaos.
They were. And they were looking to the past for guidance, to earlier texts like the Yin Convergence Classic, which also addressed attitudes toward war.
So this was a society that had a long history of warfare.
It did. And that experience, those observations, they informed their thinking about strategy, about leadership.
It's fascinating how all these different ideas came together.
It is. And by the 2nd century BCE, we see a synthesis of different philosophies, including Taoism, Confucianism, and the strategic thinking of the art of war, all coming together in texts like The Masters of Huainan.
So it was like a melting pot of ideas.
Exactly. And this broader context helps us to understand the depth and scope of Sun Tzu's insights.
The Art of War wasn't just a military manual. It was part of a larger conversation about human nature, about how to live in the world.
Precisely. Now, one of the key takeaways is that success in any major undertaking, whether it's war or business or personal growth, requires a just cause,
A just cause, meaning what?
a righteous purpose, a moral justification for your actions.
So it's not enough to just want to win. You have to be fighting for something worthwhile.
Exactly. And you need competent, respected leadership, people who can inspire and guide the effort.
Right, because even a good cause can fail under bad leadership.
Exactly. And Master Sun himself says that a good leader acts selflessly, prioritizing the well-being of the people and the success of the mission over personal gain.
So a good leader is a servant leader.
In a way, yes. And the text also highlights other important leadership qualities, like calmness, a broad perspective, different types of strengths.
So there's no one-size-fits-all model for leadership.
Right. It depends on the situation, the people involved, the goals you're trying to achieve.
And of course, any major effort requires preparation, right?
Absolutely. The text emphasizes that. Any action must be preceded by adequate preparation. And it goes into detail about the different elements of preparation: defining responsibilities, fostering loyalty, establishing rules, outlining consequences, practicing maneuvers.
So it's a holistic approach.
It is, and it even quotes Confucius. To send people to war without teaching them is called abandoning them.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. You can't just throw people into a situation without preparing them.
Right. You need to equip them with the knowledge, the skills, the mindset they need to succeed.
And while preparation is crucial, there are also times when the leaders need to be able to make decisions on the fly, right?
Absolutely. The text acknowledges that. There are times when a leader in the field needs to disregard civilian orders.
So there's a balance between following orders and using your own judgment.
Exactly. And a good leader also cares for the people they lead. They share both the hardships and the successes.
So it's not just about giving orders, it's about building relationships, fostering trust.
Right. And when you're assessing the people you're working with, it's important to recognize that not everyone has the same capabilities.
Some people are more talented than others,
Right. But even those with ordinary skills can be valuable contributors. The key is to understand each person's strengths and weaknesses.
and use them accordingly.
Exactly. And when it comes to putting these principles into action, there are certain refinements and abilities to strive for.
Like what?
Planning for difficulty, even when things are easy, that's a refinement. Recognizing and rewarding early achievements, that's another one.
So it's about being proactive, staying ahead of the curve.
Right, and being able to secure your objectives quickly and decisively. That's a true skill.
Like a chess master, anticipating moves, planning ahead.
Exactly. And the text also emphasizes the importance of order and discipline within a group.
Right. You can't have everyone running around doing their own thing.
No. An effective group needs structure, clear guidelines, consistent procedures. Everyone needs to be on the same page.
So it's like an orchestra. Everyone playing their part, following the conductor.
A perfect analogy. And that order, that discipline, it leads to harmony and cooperation.
Because when people know what's expected of them, when they trust their leaders, they're more likely to work together effectively.
Exactly. And the text also talks about the importance of listening to the people within your group, valuing their input, their perspectives.
So it's not just about top-down leadership. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels heard.
Right. And where everyone is working together toward a common goal.
Okay, so order, harmony, cooperation. What else?
Well, the text also talks about the importance of evaluation and development, making sure that the right people are in the right roles, that they're contributing effectively.
So performance reviews, basically.
In a way, yes. But it's more than that. It's about ongoing assessment, feedback, and development, making sure that everyone is growing and improving.
So it's not just about weeding out the weak links. It's about helping everyone to reach their full potential.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing that different situations call for different leadership styles.
So sometimes you need to be more directive, sometimes more collaborative.
Right. And the text even gives specific advice from historical examples, counsel given to leaders facing difficult challenges.
Oh, like case studies.
In a way, yes. And it also recounts anecdotes that illustrate important principles, like the importance of discipline, of prioritizing duty over personal connections.
So real-world examples of how these principles have been applied.
Exactly. And we also see examples of how strategic concepts have been used in battle, like feigning weakness when you're actually strong.
Okay, like playing possum.
In a way, yes. Or exploiting your opponent's weakness when you're outnumbered. The importance of defense when you're at a disadvantage, waiting for the right moment to attack. All these things are illustrated through historical examples.
So we're learning from the past.
We are. And we're also seeing how these principles have been built upon and adapted by later thinkers, like Sun Ben.
Sun Bin, he was like the descendant of Sun Tzu, right?
Yeah.